I think it is potentially dangerous because you can become obsessed by the touchscreen and it can take too long for. I mean, the radio is a very good example. There used to be fewer radio stations as well, but you used to set up 5 or 6 buttons to your favorites, or in this case, set them all to Times Radio, obviously, and then you just press one of those. But now you have to go through several layers and finger your way up and down a screen to find whatever you want.
Do you have a touchscreen in your car these days? Most of us do, but let's be honest, it can be quite difficult to work things out. We used to have buttons, which were much easier. New research shows that even doing simple tasks on smart screens can take longer. It can take 20 seconds to switch the channel on the radio, for example. James May is a former Top Gear presenter. Fortunately, he only listens to Times Radio in the car, so never needs to change the channel. Morning, James.
Morning.
I want to come on to talk about touchscreens because it is very important. But before that, Stig Abel has been infuriating and delighting our listeners in equal measure this morning because apparently his car fogs up every time he gets in it. Can you diagnose the problem, please?
What sort of car is it and how old is it?
It's a new hybrid Volvo, James. And my only point is, it's 2025. Why, when I sit in a car, do I constantly have to be pressing buttons to stop the windscreen fogging up? Surely there must be a technology where it doesn't have to do that.
Well, it's a fairly good question. There ought to be a technology that already detects that your car is fogged up and defogs it for you in advance of you getting in, which you can do with my Tesla.
Can you?
Yes, because it's an electric car. It's not technically on when I press the button on the app to warm it up prior to me going outside and getting in it. The reason your car fogs up is because there's a lot of moisture content in the air, and the way to defog, well, you've probably got one button, haven't you, that is effectively a demist button.
Yeah, or a heater for the windscreen. But basically, when I'm driving, every 25 seconds, I seem to have to press a button for the front windscreen and a button for the back windscreen, and that can't be efficient.
No, but I think it sounds to me, I mean, I do agree, it is amazing that cars continue to fog up. And part of the problem may be that cars have air conditioning now, and air conditioning removes moisture from the air but leaves it trapped in the system so that it can get out again. I don't know. There's a complicated cycle at work there, but I suspect you're not setting it up quite right if you're having to do it as you're driving along.
Stig's got himself into a complicated cycle. That sounds that sounds like it makes sense. On the touchscreen
I'm trying to avoid saying read the owner's manual because that sounds like what you've got to do.
There's no way I'm going to do that anyway, so there's no point in you saying.
Some cars don't even have paper manuals anymore. On the touchscreen question, though, it's a good one because you used to be able to do things fairly easily, like changing the radio, for example. Now with a touchscreen, I often find this. If I want to switch between the radio and the map, it would be much quicker to do it on an older car. But now it's fiddlier and your attention is taken away for longer than it ever has been.
Well, I think that's the bigger issue. I've had several cars with touchscreen. I have a Tesla which has the world's most famous touchscreen because it's replaced everything. I find it quite logical in operation, but there are several things to remember. One is there are more functions on a car now than there were, say, 10 or 20 years ago. The second is that the screen allows it to be, to some extent, reconfigurable, which manufacturers like, although I'm inclined to think that it makes them interfere with it unnecessarily. But the really big issue is that they are a distraction because you can't feel your way around controls. You have to look at the screen, which in the case of my car isn't right in front of you, it's over in the middle. And it might only be for a second, but a second is quite a long time if you're doing motorway speeds or you're going through a town centre full of all the hazards that implies. That's what I don't like about them. I don't like having to look where in the old days I could feel.
Do you feel less safe then? Because obviously the government brought in rules about smartphones to try and make people feel safer. But do you feel less safe now with these touchscreens?
Well, I don't feel less safe because I try to discipline myself to not fiddle with it as I go along. Obviously, I set it to Times Radio when I bought the car, and it'll be there when it goes to the scrapyard. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. I think it is potentially dangerous because you can become obsessed by the touchscreen, and it can take too long for. I mean, the radio is a very good example. There used to be fewer radio stations as well, but you used to set up 5 or 6 buttons to your favorites, or in this case, set them all to Times Radio, obviously, and then you just press one of those. But now you have to go through several layers and finger your way up and down a screen to find whatever you want out of the millions of DAB stations that are available. And I think it is a bit of a distraction. The telephone issue is a slightly different one, because it's not just about handling the phone, it's about the distraction to your mind of having phone conversations with a phone in your hand, and so on and so on.
Such a good point, James May. Wish we had more time, but we don't. Former Top Gear presenter James May there on touchscreens and why we should bring back the buttons in cars.